Superprime is in our area?
In terms of price or in terms of style? Or?
I think both, really.
I think Superprime is just different to the rest of the properties. So there's usually an area within an area that have specific high value homes that are special. So for example, ours, if it's got lake frontage and it's a 4,000 square foot property, you're looking at north of 5 million starting. So that's what we would call Superprime. Obviously it's different in every area, but probably the top 5%, I'd say.
Yeah,
and it's quite a large step above the 10%.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Agreed. And I think you're right, because we tend to deal with sort of top 15, 20%, but there's a percentage of that is Superprime. But we're not really talking about, say, large farms. So you might be in the middle of Lincolnshire and there might be the most expensive house in the middle of Lincolnshire might be 3, 4, 5 million because it's a huge farm with thousands of acres. And that wouldn't be Superprime. Yeah,
it's something that's a bit special, I think. If that farm was super top spec and has a swimming pool and everything else that goes with it, then it could fit into it. But it's more about the spec, style and price point.
Okay, so we know what Superprime is, something very special, different from all its neighbours, top 5%, maybe even top 3% in value.
Yes.
It's probably very large and very, very well spec'd. It probably doesn't need renovation. No. Somebody else has already spent a lot of time, effort and money on making it beautiful. So it's probably got features that no other houses have.
Yeah, and if you're thinking, well, there's no such properties in my area, then it's probably the top 2 or 3 properties that are on the market right now within the area you work in. They're probably the properties to target using what we're going to talk about.
And if you're in a very urban area, let's say you're in the middle of a city or even on the outskirts of a city, you may have to look further out from the city at the suburbs, and where the suburbs meet those little market towns and villages, that's probably where they'll sit, because that's where the people with money who work in that city would choose to live.
Yeah, and you might be wondering, well, why on earth would I target these properties? They take age to sell. Well, they can take age to sell, but if you're skilled enough at getting the right fee, then as a bonus on top of your bread and butter and what else you're doing, you could easily add £500,000 a year on top.
So tell us can you give us a case study without giving away too many details?
Potentially. I'll change quite a lot of the details.
Okay. Just to give us a flavour, really.
Yeah. It's the reason why I'm being slightly cagey is it's an ongoing situation that it hasn't completed, but it'll give us a high 6-figure fee with it's been quite a lot of time spent on it, but in terms of actual cost, it's probably less than 4 figures cost. So from a profit point of view, we'd have to sell 10, 12, 15 properties for this one.
So the fee will be over £100,000 comfortably.
Comfortably. We've got another one further down that is a similar price point that I also think will sell hopefully fairly quickly. So those 2 deals together will be in excess of 300,000, and that's
pretty amazing.
That's higher than a lot of agents for a year that come and see us.
Yeah, I would say that's true. I think a lot of agents sit around the £300,000 a year mark, even when they've got lettings as well, and they really struggle to break out of that.
And I think there's a strange fear factor in the industry about who should be selling these properties.
Where do you think agents think that those sellers go to?
Savills, Knight Frank, Fine and Country, etc.
Sometimes Stratton Parker, Jackson Stocks.
Yeah, just the people that traditionally have sold them, and the reason why the owners go to these places because they have traditionally sold them. So it's a self-fulfilling sort of machine that until you poke your finger in it and stop the wheel going round, it'll continue.
No, you mentioned that the second property you mentioned is down from the first property, and that's because we've got a very specific area here, haven't we? That's fairly close to our office, where a lot of the super prime properties sit. It's on a very popular part of the lake.
That's on the lake, yeah.
Yeah, and a very expensive part of the lake. And it's where, if somebody has got a lot of money and they want lake frontage, they want this side of the lake for various different reasons, like close to amenities, better sunshine, all those kind of things.
Not sure about that last bit, but
well, the reason I say sunshine is because on the other side of the lake, so the west, they don't get a sunset.
No.
And a lot of the later part of their day is in shadow, or rain as it is today, which is on both sides of the lakes.
Yes.
So those people, I like to think they talk to each other. They're a community. They're a community of high net worth individuals. They have certainly got more than one property. That is not their only property. They've bought that home with the idea of elevating their lifestyle, and they've really enjoyed being able to spend a ton of money on that house. And so they've got the best gadgets. They've got the most beautiful
some of them do.
kitchen. I know not all of them do, that's true. But then they're ripe for the next wave, aren't they, of people? But a lot of these have already been done. They've either been knocked down and rebuilt, or they've been substantially renovated. They're no longer in council tax band D.
No.
And so I like to think they talk to each other, because if they do, they're going to recommend us.
Well, it's definitely a momentum thing.
Yeah.
We didn't get into any lake frontage homes for maybe 4 years, and this year alone I'll have been in 5 or 6.
So what do you think the tipping point was, and what did we do that didn't work?
I think, well, just by the nature of the price of the house and the style of the house and who owns these houses, they don't come up often. Like the case study, if you like, that we discussed earlier, that family's been in the property 60 years. So, and there's probably only 20 maybe of these properties, so they're obviously not going to come up often, and usually they're kept in families, etc. And what we found since we've opened is certain areas become hotspots for a 6-month period, a year period. I don't know whether people see others selling and think, right, I'll sell, and it rolls on. And relentless content. So, as you will all know by now, we send not on the market letters quarterly. And I spoke to somebody who owns 2 people actually last week who own lake frontage homes. One guy rang and said, I've been receiving your letters for years, and I'd now like some advice. And the other guy said, I'm not looking to sell my house right now, but I've got this other house. Can you go and value that? And then that was 2 million. So just by speaking to them consistently and speaking in their language and giving them the information that they presume as being useful, they feel like you are the only person they could ask. They should ask.
I remember when Humbert's opened here, they're a franchise, and they don't normally come as far north as us. In fact, we were probably their furthest north franchise outlet at the time. And they only lasted about maybe a year or 2, something like that, wasn't it? And they were sending out really nicely written, actually, updates. Do you remember? Market updates. We still got one, haven't we? And it was bound, and it was in an A4 envelope, and it looked nice. But when you opened it and you dug into it, it felt really generic. Did you feel like that?
It was generic data, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was generic data, and it felt like
For the northwest. Well, Manchester's a bit different to Windermere.
And when you're speaking to somebody with that kind of high net worth, you need to make them feel there's a connection, that you understand them. And I think that's why the not on the market letters worked and work still.
Yes.
Because they feel like you're specifically writing to them as a local, wholly owned agency, and you're speaking to them about their beautiful home. You need to have that connection that makes them feel like what they're reading is relevant and what they're reading is worth their time to read, because it's a 6-page letter very often.
Yeah.
It's a lot, isn't it?
The amount of people that say how much they enjoy reading it must get. I mean, I don't speak to that many people, but it'll be a couple a month easy, and I probably only speak to 4 or 5 people, vendors a month.
So I think it's because it's written in your voice, your tone of voice. So it talks about I and it talks about you. Whereas the Humbert's letters, and nothing against the Humberts, because at least they're writing something, they just felt like you were reading a news report. You might as well have been reading The Guardian. You know, homes in the northwest have increased by blah blah.
Yeah.
That doesn't speak to them, does
No,
it?
it was all data driven.
Yeah. Well, ours do have data, but it's the way that you deliver it.
Yeah. So I use the data by making the point and backing it up with data. I don't just deliver data.
No.
And it's very relevant data to that audience.